Hi, I'm Heather Bergman with Peak Facilitation Group, and I'm here interviewing my friend Marin Chambers from the Colorado Forest Restoration Institute to talk about the role of science in collaboration. Hey, Marin.
Hi,
Hey, can you tell folks what your job is with CFRI and what your experience has been with collaboration?
absolutely. Thank you for having me, by the way. So I'm a forest ecologist with the Colorado Forest Restoration Institute at Colorado State University. And my role with collaboration is primarily with forest collaboratives here in Colorado. And that's actually all over Colorado, not just on the Front Range of Colorado where CSU is located. And often my role is really to serve as a couple of different things. The first is to serve as a kind of scientific expert or scientific translator. I'm also serve as someone who helps create actionable knowledge. And so that is, in my mind, really by doing things like monitoring forest restoration treatments, and other kind of management activities to help inform large collaborative groups about what those activities resulted in terms of ecological impacts, for example. And then we work through adaptive management processes to kind of try to learn from things that we've learned through monitoring. So, and then additionally for my role at CFRI, I also create scientific knowledge via doing scientific research.
So, I'm a big old collaboration nerd. That all sounds super interesting to me. It also sounds like a lot of work. Why do you do it? Why does CFRI deploy you in particular in this way? What are the benefits?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I feel like a lot of the collaborative groups that I'm involved with or I've been exposed to, there's lots of different stakeholders at the table. There's managers, scientists from the U.S. Forest Service, the Colorado State Forest Service, lots of other county agencies, et cetera. Lots of utility companies are there. And so there's just a lot of different perspectives in the room. And a lot of times they're trying to make a lot of their decisions based on the best available science. And so that's where, CFRI finds that we have an opportunity to both help inform this kind of management and to help create resilient forests.
Do you have thoughts on how we as a collaborative community should grapple with the contested science, or with the contestation of science by people who aren't scientists?
I guess I'll kind of boil it down to, that's often my role is
Mhm.
someone who has read the vast majority of papers. And, it's kind of like from old to new, even newest science that's happening at some of the universities that haven't been published yet. So I have a really good understanding of the breadth of the research that's happened. And so then I can kind of put a study in this larger framework of studies and kind of the generally accepted or kind of common understandings of a particular subject within science. I think when it comes down to the debates in science, that's the power of science, right? Like, in my opinion, that is why the scientific process is really important, is that we are constantly challenging each other, we're constantly disagreeing with each other, and we're constantly pushing each other to think really hard about these subjects, whatever they are. Even within a very small scientific niche, not all authors agree with each other, and in part that's because of lots of different factors, like scientific methods that actually collected that data, different analyses and ways of interpreting the data. But then, scientists we're intended to be unbiased, but we are all human and we're bringing our own perspectives and our own values to our science. And so that's just a complicated mess to a certain extent. That's really what helps us all sharpen our edges as well. Like some of the groups that you and I work with, there are scientific debates on some of the subject matter that we're discussing, and that's really important to kind of moving forward in the collaborative process. And I think the challenge is when we don't kind of step back and look at the scientific literature as a whole and try to understand this debate within this larger literature and the larger body of knowledge that we have. We can sometimes get stuck in like finding a paper that really upholds our value or our interpretation, and I can do this as well. And so I'm constantly challenging myself to sort of couch everything in this larger body of knowledge, and then trying to understand the details as well. So it's like, what's the big generalization and what's the details, and what really matters for the conversation. And I think that's where within the collaborative setting, these kinds of debates about science can get us really into the muck. And that might be really important for moving forward in the collaborative process, or it might detract from what our ultimate goal is. And so I kind of always come back to, what is our real goal? What are our real objectives? And how do we really get there? And if debating the science really gets us there, and that's happened in a lot of collaborative groups, then that's fantastic. If it doesn't get us there, then maybe we should drop it and focus on our personal values instead.
It's interesting that you say that, because I've also seen science be the thing that gets the group through, that the answer is in the science. And part of the challenge with forestry in particular, as you say, is it seems like there's a fair number of debate, or a fair number of topics about which there is debate. You know, I always joke, if you have 4 foresters, you have 8 opinions about anything given, any topic on forestry. And so when the collaborative is looking to anchor the answer in the science, it is difficult in this way.
Yeah.
Whereas for other topics that I work on, you know, the group says, we have these scientific questions. Once we answer the questions, the policy answer follows from the science. And here the policy answer doesn't always follow from the science, because the science is unclear. The assumptions that undergird the science are highly variable and somewhat debated. So it does make it tricky.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And do you find that the struggle, though, is consistent collaborative to collaborative? That so here's what I would say. In any given collaborative, there are a couple of roles that are played by someone. I'm entrenched in my position. I can't get out of it. I lack empathy. I can't get out of it. I'm going to bend over backwards to make this work, even if it's at the detriment of my own interest. Like there are just people who show up. And I mean, for me, that's the joy of it. I'm like, wow, the diversity of human behavior and personality and preference and collaborative skill, and how it shows up differently in every environment. That Forest Service staff in one place and Forest Service staff in another place are different. And community members in one place are different from community members in another place. And as you know, big democracy nerd, like to me, that's the delight of the work. That's also the challenge of the work. And I have watched you educate just a wide variety of humans in a wide variety of professional and personal roles about the science, because that's the job, right?
Yep.
So cool.
Well, and it's interesting you mentioned the democracy piece, because you know, I've had lots of collaborative experience in like previous jobs, but nothing like these collaborative experiences in natural resource management until I got my job at CFRI. And it was really eye-opening to me. But one of the coolest pieces about it was, you know, having been a political nerd for a really long time. And, you know, I went to DC when I was like 14 or 15 and just like completely geeked out on just all of the things, you know, just that our democracy has provided for us. It was a really interesting thing for me to see these forest collaborative groups, because they're working like mini congresses. They're sharing risks, they're sharing resources, they're sharing decision making. Like, I thought that just happened at DC. You know, it's happening everywhere all the time. That is just extraordinary. And it makes me think about my city council differently. It makes me think about my state legislature differently. It makes me think about, you know, the school districts differently. Like everyone is working together like this in various ways. And I think in natural resource management, there's a lot of complicated stuff. It's really challenging. It's really hard. Considering how big these problems are and how many ecological services they impact, how many people they impact, how many risks there are involved. You know, we're talking about fires and human lives and homes and industries. You know, it's really heavy stuff. And the complication that we have added onto all of that is that our climate is changing. And so what we know to be true is not necessarily going to be true in the future. It's, you know, and so that's an added complexity for us. I don't know if I'm just an optimistic person, or you have to be optimistic when you see people work together like this. I think that's a really beautiful piece of this, is that it's pretty hard to go into a consistent collaborative experience, but to like look back on a year of collaboration that you've been involved with and not feel like, wow, we've actually come pretty far, and we've trumbled through the dirt together, and we've come out on the other side of all of these, you know, bridges or hurdles, and we're all better for it. And so that's inspiring. And I don't think it's easy to be in this field and be involved in collaboration and not feel optimistic when you see what people can actually do together. So that's all I got to say about that.
Yeah, and I feel the same way. And my work is hard. Your work is hard. And I get up every day and I do it with the greatest of joy for exactly the reason that you just described, right? These are people who give of their own free time to solve problems that are hard. And collaboration is hard. Labor is in the name. It's hard. And they keep coming and they do it, and they solve really hard problems on a local level, and it gives me hope. And when all this other stuff is going on in the national and even the statewide level about political and positional division, I am always the optimist, because I've seen the things. I've seen what people will do, and people will solve hard problems. They will come to the table and they will work, and it's amazing. It is. It's amazing. Does the nature of the conversation, the quality, the tenor, the role of science, does it change from local small scale conversations of a small watershed or sub watershed to a bigger scale conversation?
Well, you're speaking to an ecologist. So my answer for almost everything is it depends, or it's variable, right? And so
science people are so reliable on that.
So I definitely don't mean to dodge the question, but I do have to say that, you know, my experience with collaborative conversations is that every collaborative conversation is different. And the quality of the conversation is really hard to put your finger on unless you've been with the collaborative from day one or until you can see the very end of the project. And even then, the question is like, well, what were the goals, and how are you interpreting the way that those goals were achieved or not? I don't know. That's a really hard question to answer, because I think you're getting into a bunch of other things about like, how do you define the quality of a collaborative conversation or the quality of collaborative outcomes? And so, yes, based on scaling up, you know, in terms of the size of the landscape, yeah, you're going to have different conversations. And so that's absolutely true. But whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing, I can't speak to. I can't speak to that, because I've been in collaborative conversations that were local, that were amazing, and the people are just phenomenal. And I've been in much larger scale collaboratives, like Collaborative Forest Landscape Restoration Program, for example, which is a huge deal. And those have been amazing collaboratives that are, you know, just phenomenal shining star examples of collaboration. And so it's really variable. And I guess I'll say this, I've never been in a collaborative yet where I've been like, this collaborative sucks. I've never, you know, there might be a meeting that wasn't fantastic, but I think the thing that gives me optimism, the thing that I'm always inspired by, and to me shows quality, is that there's always a conversation moving forward, even if it's not apparent in that moment. And so I'll go back to, it depends, but I'm generally, the fact that people are at the table at all, trying to work to better our natural resources, to better our ecosystem services, to better our own lives, that's amazing. So I'll never say that small scale or large scale is better than the other. So,
All right. So, Marin Chambers, if you could summarize your advice or big takeaways about collaboration in 10 words or fewer, what would you tell the people?
could it be closer to like 18?
Yes. Have you already counted them?
I did count. I did count what I wanted to say earlier. I guess my thoughts would be patient, be curious, be empathetic with others who are at the collaborative table. And then, really, I think it's the old saying, listen with two ears, see with two eyes, speak with one mouth. And, really listening to other people and really with your, not only your mind, but your heart as well, trying to understand where they're coming from, both professionally, personally. I think that really goes a long way because you're extending a hand.
Marin
Yeah.
Chambers, my friend, thank you so much for your thoughts about science and all the things in collaboration. I have, as I always do, enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you, Heather.